For weeks, I've been investigating what really took place at a middle school in Kelowna, British Columbia. Initially, the public was told the incident resulted in little more than a scratch, but what I've since learned from people close to some of the victims tells a very different story. They say a teenager believed to identify as transgender entered the girls' washroom on a mission to kill, leaving not one, not two, but four other students caught up in the traumatic event. I'm Drea Humphrey with Rebel News, and you should know that it's taken me navigating through a legal minefield to bring you this story, but thankfully, I didn't have to do that alone. With the help of the Independent Press Gallery, whom you can donate to support on their website, I received experienced legal counsel that they contracted to help me best understand the publication bans involved in this case. And it's because of that work, more of the victim stories can now be told. What if your 11-year-old daughter was stabbed and repeatedly struck inside of the school washroom, and the public was basically told it wasn't as big of a deal? That's just one of the troubling details you'll soon hear about involving a violent attack on young schoolgirls at Springvalley Middle School in Kelowna, BC. The RCMP described the incident that occurred back in May as suspicious circumstances. They said that the school staff activated its lockdown procedures, that officers contained the threat, and a youth, who they referred to as they, was taken into custody and later charged. Barely any media touched this story, despite its seriousness. The few pieces of coverage I did find offered a little bit more details, such as the accused had been previously apprehended under the Mental Health Act several times earlier this year, and also that the accused was armed with a dull kitchen knife and scratched one of what sounded like two girls who were caught up in the public bathroom, the school bathroom, that is. Then, a few weeks ago, someone reached out to me to tell me there's a lot more to this story. And since then, I've spoken on and off camera to family, people close to some of those four victims. Not just two students, as many were led to believe. Before I continue on with this story, though, I need a little legal housekeeping, if you will. Thanks to the Independent Press Gallery, through part of this investigation, I've been advised by Kyle Benvenu of Hira Rowan Lawyers. You might actually recognize Benvenu. Rebel News previously retained him to successfully have the court lift publication bans that restricted my reporting on the acts of Jessica Simpson, a violent trans activist formerly known as Jonathan Yaniv. But unlike that case, where Simpson had gotten those extraordinary protections after alleged heightened risks tied to how Simpson identifies, this case is different. Here, the publication ban is not discretionary. This time, it's because the accused is a youth. The Youth Criminal Justice Act automatically prohibits publishing their name or any information that would identify them, and I'll be keeping them anonymous. The same goes for the victims, whose families also don't want their children identified for obvious reasons. Also, even though I attended court hearings in this case, the facts and information I present in this report were obtained and independently verified outside of those proceedings. And lastly, I want to be clear about one more thing. Nothing in this report is intended to suggest that there's a causal relationship between gender identity and violence. Instead, my point is much slimmer. Despite the relatively small percentage of people who identify as transgender or non-binary in North America, there have been recent high-profile attacks involving individuals who report to have such identities, including BC's very own tragic school massacre in Tumbler Ridge earlier this year. Because of that public interest, and because multiple witnesses and family members independently described the accused in this situation as presenting as transgender or non-binary, I think it would be irresponsible journalism to omit such a fact when I can lawfully report on it. And neither is omitting much of what actually occurred to these girls when you can report on it. Hence, what you're about to hear now.
Received a phone call from the school stating that my daughter had been involved in an incident, and there was a knife involved and a stab wound. To them, they did say it was superficial, but we do recommend you take her to the hospital. However, they also said they didn't know if it was a real knife or a fake knife. And in the meantime, waiting for my child to get home from school, upon her coming home, we found out that she had multiple other injuries that they didn't even recognize or assess or anything like that. They stabbed our daughter in the back and said to the children, I need to kill someone today, proceeded to push the other children and push our child against the wall and continue to hit her continuously in the face, in the head, and the chest until she was able to. One of her friends called her name. She snapped out of it. This person then grabbed her wrist and gave her scratch wounds on her arm that drew blood, and all her bracelets were broken. And then they were able to get away and find a teacher.
So the school may have gone into lockdown and called authorities fast, but what these parents described happened to their daughter in need wasn't fast nor on the ball. Listen to the dad explain what happened when he heard what was happening.
Like, well, the school's on lockdown. And I'm like, okay, but like, is our daughter okay? Like, you have to take her to the hospital. How bad is she hurt? Uh, they didn't tell me anything.
Mhm.
I'm like, how bad is she hurt? And why, if you have to take her to the hospital, why didn't they call the ambulance? Why
Mm-hmm.
isn't the ambulance there? Why do you call a parent who could be, say, like in half an hour to an hour away working to come pick their kid up to bring them to the hospital when you could just call the ambulance and have the kid brought to the hospital? Instead, you induce this chaotic panic and you don't provide the proper information.
Adding salt to the wounds is how, according to the parents, the ball was initially dropped at every corner when it came to helping their child. And that includes the minimization of her being attacked with a weapon, blunt or not, and beaten by a school intruder.
The fact that they did not do their due diligence to check on my child's well-being after being stabbed, for her to come home and have visible bruising on her face, on her chest, and scratches on her arm, and then for the school to say, well, we didn't know that happened. She just told us about her back. My child is 11 years old and she just got assaulted. And you're telling me that the only reason why you didn't do anything else is because she said she wanted to go home to her mom. Well, no doubt she wants to go to home to her mom. She doesn't know what just happened. So the fact that there was no medical assessment and they're saying RCMP was responsible for that. She had head trauma. What if she had a concussion? Like why was it we had to wait until my daughter got home to see the bruising for her to tell us exactly what happened. Like everything, every protocol, everything they went about, they dropped the ball and it was not okay. And things need to change.
Had worded it like, oh, a superficial wound, or there was an alleged attacker.
Alleged,
Like,
yeah.
no, like there was an attacker. There was
Children who got
like
injured.
there was injuries because we know the children that were injured. Like there was no alleged, there was no superficial. Like there's blood, there's an attacker,
Bruising.
and it's just the way everything's worded. And yeah, like you said, it's to minimize it, right?
And don't lie in the media to talk about it, Tell these children what happened to teach them for the next time, God forbid, this happens. This is a real situation that happened. Stop trying to sweep it under the rug. Things need to change.
These parents are not the only ones sharing such frustrations. I spoke to others off camera connected to some of the victims. They also are not impressed with the downplaying of an incident where, if not for the dullness of the knife, these children may no longer be with us today. Naturally, them and even the other families with kids in that school were left wondering, how safe are our kids when attending this school?
I have been emailing since the day it happened, asking some pretty basic questions. And I have been ignored. I've been given basically a copy and paste kind of answer with no actual answer. So then I moved it to, okay, who was directly involved with my child? Still to that point, no answer. We can't tell you. No, you guys have, I have every right to know what individuals, RCMP, school members, paramedics, whoever was involved with my own child, I should have every right to know. She is 11 years old. And we did not get any of those answers. I have sent multiple emails asking for a response via email because her dad works out of town. Obviously, this is a stressful situation. I do not want miscommunication, but they cannot give me those answers.
In order to start getting some answers, Mom says it took them returning to the scene of the crime unannounced, and adding to their concerns about that was how even after what had happened to these girls, what had happened at Tumbler Ridge, they were able to do so undetected.
I walked back to the office, still nothing as we stood there. I had to reach out on my own to a staff member to go into the office to get someone to acknowledge that we were there. And that is when the principal and the vice principal finally rushed the two of us in and had a meeting with us and gave us some very easy answers that they could have gave us from day one, explaining, one, why they couldn't give us certain things, and then who was involved with our child. That was never said for the 3 weeks before that. So the uncertainty of very basic questions, that just made it that much worse.
Also frustrating was what the family describes as a lack of overall support. Victim services, they say, was great, but the struggle to get help for their child and clarity on what's going to be done moving forward to keep her safe was challenging, and the wait list for victim services is long.
She had to go to chiropractor. She had to go to a massage therapist. Her pelvis was pushed out of place. You know, where's the support for that? And it took me 2 weeks of emailing the school, what supports do you have? Before now, they finally have supports in place. And I'm thankful that they do, but what can they do differently next time for the next family, God forbid, has to go through this?
Spring Valley and Tumbler Ridge parents are not the only ones in British Columbia's school community where parents say that they've been left wondering whether enough is being done to prevent attacks like this. Not even an hour and a half away from Spring Valley, a similar threat unfolded mid-spring in Falkland, BC, after a troubled teens kill list targeting 16 kids was discovered, and many in the Falkland community felt the authorities failed to keep their kids safe in the days after.
We had heard that youth from Falkland who attended PBSS secondary school in Armstrong had written a list of 16 children's, teens' names that he intended to do harm to. This came across, it was very shocking, upsetting, And especially knowing that the youth in question lived directly across from the elementary school, where there's any time 120 plus students, elementary students attending.
My former Rebel News colleague and independent journalist Mocha Bezergan captured how some of those tensions were unfolding as the youth was free to roam near the elementary school, causing parents to understandably panic, and grandmas like Lori Ann.
Heard that he was suspended. Then he was, after that, he was not allowed to come back at all. And so then, the concern continued. So what is this boy being supervised full time at home? And then people in the neighborhood started seeing him outside, walking around.
Yeah.
Like, no, didn't seem like much of a concern, but it was a concern to the parents. They're dropping their kids at elementary school, and the kids would normally be out at recess and lunch.
Right.
And then the school started keeping them in at recess and lunch because everybody would see the youth walking around. And then spring break happened, so there was 2 weeks off. Again, didn't really hear much. Right after spring break, there was a PAC meeting. So some people went to the PAC meeting to hopefully get clarification on what's going on. Is there any follow-up to any information? And we were basically told, well, if you're here to talk about the incident with the youth across the street, we're going to have to ask you to leave. I thought Parent Advisory Council is parents being advised by the council. So we didn't really get any answers there, but the principal was great, and he was open to private conversations with individual parents or groups of parents, like couples and such.
Or why not hire security? I reached out to a former peace officer who worked within schools for years to keep kids safe. Now, his current position prevented him from publicly speaking to this matter, but he did tell me that there is no reason school districts can't simply hire security to keep their kids safe, especially in scenarios like this, where you have the school keeping in little kids who need to run around during recess indoors during lunch, and you have parents coming out to have a human barrier between them and the potential risk. And I dare say, shame on the RCMP. The irony wasn't lost on Lori Ann. While the RCMP simply couldn't spare one officer to keep watch for a few weeks while assessments and a real solution for this serious potential risk across the street from the school was resolved, telling these families, you got an issue, you need to talk to a cop 30 minutes away. They certainly had no issues deploying hundreds of officers around the clock for weeks on end from rural Edgewood, BC to help the CFIA kill healthy ostriches. And that rural place is only a couple of hours away from Falkland.
Because there's been a number of times where during the ostrich incident or the ostrich couple months there, that we would go to Vernon. And there was a number of hotels that would house the officers. So we would count how many patrol cars and unmarked cars were there. And it's like sometimes there was more than a dozen, sometimes there's a dozen and a half.
Yeah.
So it's very mind-boggling how the amount of money and resources got put into that ostriches, whereas a list that's written, we can't even get one to attend the school.
One thing is clear. After Tumbler Ridge, a kill list, Springvalley Middle School stabber, all this year, all in British Columbia, we need to do better before more children are hurt. And for the families I spoke to connected to the Spring Valley attack, that's the driving force behind why they wanted the real story to be told.
I feel like just awareness at this point, because I don't think like anything's really gonna happen to the attacker, because and this is just my personal belief, is the justice system kind of protects criminals. but it just to like bring awareness, and hopefully nobody else's kids go through this. And just going through what we went through with the school district, to how essentially they tried to just like brush it off, not say anything, and just kind of brush us under the rug, hoping we would go away. And like, I can't even imagine how many times they've done that in other situations to other parents.
It shouldn't have to take a tragedy for things to change.
Yeah, but the way our society is a tragedy has to happen before something happens, right? But that's kind of where we're at. That's why we're kind of pushing this, is just like maybe something might change before a kid dies, or before another kid brings a gun to a school. Yeah.
The other thing, nobody should have to go without the doubt of knowing of what actually happened until a week later, when we got a phone call from RCMP to confirm what actually happened. Us as parents dealing with a child, we should know, and we should not be told not to talk to our child about it that night until she makes a statement. That is not acceptable. That's not okay. So awareness and changes, protocol changes, both for RCMP and school district, needs to happen.
I'm told their daughter is building up the courage, but still struggling. While she eventually made it back to school, the world is a very different place to her now, one where she's even experiencing panic attacks in public. The BC Prosecution Service has confirmed the youth accused now faces a total of 7 charges: 2 counts of assault with a weapon, 3 counts of assault, 1 count of uttering threats, and 1 count of possessing a weapon for a dangerous purpose. The matter remains before the courts, and much of this case remains unpublishable by law. Drea Humphrey for Rebel News. At Rebel News, we go through great lengths to bring you the other side of the story, and sometimes we're under attack for doing so. That's why we need your help to help us legally defend ourselves in the case in the Human Rights Tribunal, where violent trans activist Jessica Simpson, formerly known as Jonathan Yaniv, is upset over our fact-based reports on the menacing to society that individual has done. If you appreciate the work that we do, please go to stopyaniv.com and donate what you can.